like to use a lot of dry techniques when I work with stencils, so I'm going to show you a few of them that I enjoy using, and I'm going to demonstrate them in my journal. The first one is with Pan Pastels, which, if you've never used Pan Pastels, it's like a kind of a solidified version of a soft pastel. And I apply them with a sponge. They actually come with a sponge for application purposes, but I just have a cosmetic sponge I'm using here. So I've got my journal page open, and I'm going to put a little border down here. I'm using part of the Cityscape stencil, just a little part of the side piece. I'm going to put a border down the side of the journal. I'm going to pick this dark color. Just get a little bit of the pastel on there. And I just brush it across the stencil, kind of moving away from the stencil. Since it's dry, it doesn't have the tendency to bleed under the stencil like your wet materials will. However, if you pull it away from the stencil like this, it works especially well. So then we remove the stencil, and you can see I have this little border here. Let's do another one down at the bottom, and you can take another look at this. Well, maybe let's do this part of it here. After you've put the Pan Pastels down in your journal, you may want to give the page a little spray with like a fixative, so it keeps it all in place. So, okay, so here we've put some colors down here, and there's a little bit of the powder on the top. The other thing you could do if you wanted to go back and blend out parts to make it look a little more organic, you can just kind of use your sponge as like a brush. You could also use your fingers too, but I'm trying to keep clean, which is something unusual for me. So I think you can easily see how you can add some nice little accents with this. Let's put a bird on it, huh? Let's put a bird up here. Okay, and there's a little bird. The other thing that you can do is take your, like your Faber-Castell, your big Pitt pens. I love these Artist Pitt pens, and you can also use this to kind of outline, use your stencil as a guideline. And then while it's still wet, you can kind of blend it out just a little bit into that Pan Pastel. And get a little bit of a deeper look if you want, so it just pops that back part of the bird up there. Okay, so this page is ready for me to keep working on. The next dry technique is a sanding technique, and I use magazine pages for this. And I've got a few pages here that I've previously sanded, and here's an example of what I've done. I took this stencil and I put this paper on top and then sanded, and you get this, it sands away the printed part of the magazine page. So you get this very kind of interesting effect that you can use in your journals that people don't often know how you did it. Here's another one I did with the little bird, and I sanded it, and I actually got a little overzealous with my sanding, and I made some holes in there, and I love how this looks. I think that it's going to be wonderful to take this into my journal and, you know, probably tear away and put this bird somewhere in my journal. So I'm definitely going to use him. So here's how you do it. There's different ways, there's different kinds of paper I like for this. Sometimes if you want a pattern on pattern effect, you can pull a pattern paper and then do a pattern stencil, and you get this very intriguing look. Here's the same stencil used on two different types of paper to give you an idea of the different results that you can get. So let's try one. Well, let me find a stencil here that's going to be interesting. And you just lay your stencil down on your work surface and then lay your chosen paper right on top of it. Doesn't have to be any special kind of magazine, doesn't have to be any special sandpaper. I tend to use something that's a little bit of a finer grit because I don't want to just totally blow the paper away. And then just sand with a decently firm hand. And you can see this design popping up here. This is a great way to make these little collage elements that are so mysterious that, when you incorporate this into, a very detailed page, people are gonna look at it and think, wow, how did she do that? Which that's kind of what I like to do in my work, is make these little component parts that are so interesting and different that it's hard for people to figure out how they've been made. The final dry technique that I want to show you is how I use stencils when I doodle. And here's an example of a page in process that I started out with some stencils. And then I will just keep working. I'll carry this book with me. This is just a book for work in pen that I think works really well when I'm doodling. But any kind of like a Bristol paper or a smooth paper is going to be great for this technique. And for pens, I just tend to grab whatever. I like these little Identa pens because they have two ends. They have a fat end and a skinny end. And it's really nice. You just grab one pen. But these pens, these microperms or microns, any pens will work for this. Okay, so here's how I make a page like this. Here's another one that there's no doodling done on it yet. And here's another one where there's no doodling, where I'm ready to start doodling on these pages now. And here's another one. So let's make a page similar to this, and I'll show you how I do it. So you need to grab a couple stencils, and you have choices. I mean, you can grab a stencil that has a lot of open parts, and of course you can doodle within those open parts. You could also grab a stencil that has open parts and layer a detailed stencil under it. So imagine you could do this and you could trace all of these little detailed parts with your pen if you want. That's certainly one way to approach it. I like to create more open spaces and sort of just frameworks for me to kind of go off in my own direction. Because that's just sort of how I like to do it. I will start with my pen and just trace these little openings that I want to doodle within. And you might notice that they're not perfect. I have a little blob of marker there. Big deal. I mean, I'm going to go back and doodle, and by the time I'm finished, that's going to become a part of a component of my doodling that you're never even going to see. So that doesn't concern me. So you can just pick some other parts. You can grab another stencil and create some little linear components, which are great to put little checkerboard doodle things within. If you're a Zentangle person, I don't know if this would work for Zentangles or not. I tend to not follow the rules. I just sort of doodle very randomly and create designs that please me. The other thing to remember is that you are making this your own. So if you go across parts, you can always fill in the lines or just create something completely new. It doesn't matter. You don't need to use the stencil in the exact configuration it was designed. It simply doesn't matter. This is your doodle. You do what you want. And so then let's say you want to put this little Marrakesh design around here. I'll find one that that fits. Okay, here we go. Here's the one that fits. And so this could be the start to a page. So when I'm out, you know, hanging at a coffee shop or something, all I need to do then is grab my book and a pen, and I'm good to go. I'm sitting on an airplane, which is often the case for me, or waiting somewhere, and I'm ready to go now. I can, you know, go back in and, you know, create my little doodle patterns right within these spaces I've already established here on the page. Hopefully you've gotten some ideas of how to make these dry techniques your own using stencils.